So Richard, we've got the new Sony FR7. Would you call it a PTZ camera or would you call it a cinema camera?
I'd call it a freaking robot.
Robot. We've got the freaking robot from Sony
yeah.
here. I think it's safe to say we're all fairly excited about this. When you first saw this, when they brought a picture up on the screen for the first time of this camera and the first time you took it out of the box, what were your thoughts?
Well, to be honest, I first saw it physically. I hadn't even seen a picture before it arrived with us. And my first feeling was, it looked less of a Frankenstein's monster than I was expected. It actually looks like a very integrated camera.
It's a sleek design, isn't it?
It is, yeah, definitely. It looks like it was always meant to be, which I wasn't expecting. I kind of expected it to be an FX6 front end bolted onto a PTZ head. It doesn't look or feel like that at all.
No, absolutely. There's nothing that feels, you know, Meccano-y, DIY-y here. This all feels like it's designed
the only
to
difference between this and a more traditional PTZ is the fact it has got interchangeable lenses, which in itself makes it pretty unique.
I mean, that was my first question, was how do you balance the lenses in the front, of course, because once you start opening up interchangeable lenses, you can put tiny ones on, you can put huge ones on. How do you cope with balance on a PTZ head?
Yeah.
And that sliding system is brilliant for that.
Yeah, just like, you know, obviously like a gimbal, just that extra dimension to be able to move it back for balance is great.
It is exactly the same as a gimbal. Just like a gimbal, you need that center of balance, otherwise the motors have to work so much harder.
And just like a gimbal also, there will be limitations to the weight of lenses you can put on it.
Absolutely.
But there is a lens support that has got bars down there, and so you can put a lens support on for the heavier ones, but it's how much weight can those motors physically move, you know, without straining.
Needs some testing, doesn't it? So, I mean, you've got far more experience than I do with the current PTZ market. For people who are used to PTZs and maybe are running big productions with, you know, anywhere from like 5 to 100 PTZs going on at once, you know, how do you think this is going to fit into that kind of workflow?
Amazingly well, because you've got the Sony IP protocol for control. You've got the functionality of having gen lock for using it for live events to save that extra frame, time code in for multi-camera support, but uniquely you've got high quality recording as well. You know, when I've seen setups for fixed rig productions, you know, some of these things like Doctors Behind Closed Doors and programs like this using, you know, upwards of 100 cameras, they have a separate bank of recorders to record every camera. That's not necessary with this. You can take that infrastructure out.
You can still use it if you want to,
of course,
but you don't have to,
yeah.
Which is really nice.
Yeah, exactly, and it's a major saving on infrastructure to be able to do that. So yeah, that's the first thing. It has recording, but in terms of fitting into that market, you know, it just fits in. It's got the same ins and outs as Panasonic UE150, which is one of the most common sort of PTZs used in that sort of higher end production now.
Absolutely, and the look you get from this is just something that has never even been comprehensible in the PTZ market right now.
You know, that's really true. In fact, only a couple of weeks before it came, I was experimenting putting a full frame box camera onto a PTZ head to try and create a full frame PTZ. And that was honestly before I knew this was coming. And I loved the pictures, but the problem was the integration. You needed a separate control for the camera and separate control for the PTZ head.
Something as simple as, how do I see the menus?
Yes.
From not
it became a big issue. Exactly. But with this camera, you know, the web control gives you so much control over the camera menus. It's like sitting in front of a touchscreen.
Absolutely.
With added control possibilities as well, because I can transfer files over a network, and I can adjust all the settings on the camera, even to the sort of high extent of being able to change it to 120 frames a second. So I can be outputting standard 12 gig video for a live event, but recording 120 frames a second. That's remarkable. There's nothing else, you know, I don't know, short of 60, 70,000 pounds, which would give anything like that sort of flexibility.
So for that current PTZ kind of customer using a big production with PTZs, how do you think this improvement in image quality and stepping up to a full frame sensor is going to change things?
It makes I think I'm slightly flippant in saying it makes the possibility of making a Love Island type program look like Made in Chelsea. So it's suddenly that full frame aesthetic is available for fixed rig shooting.
I mean, you're always able to get that on a production. Use Love Island
with
as an
a
example.
cameraman.
With a cameraman. Exactly. You know, with a camera operator there, with a camera on their shoulder. And I think they will still want to use those because you always need to be able to react to the unpredictability and the flexibility. Yeah. But being able to have a fixed PTZ camera as a hero sort of flagship image quality one, rather than a catch-all, camcorder style one. It is almost the difference in terms of in the non-PTZ world where we use cinema cameras and where we use camcorders. One is not better than the other. There is a place for both of them, and there will be a place for PTZs like this, and there will be a place for PTZs with 30 times optical zooms on them.
Exactly. I mean, for instance, sport, the type of servo zooms we've got at the moment from Sony aren't going to give us the reach we need for a football pitch. May be okay for a tennis court, but not for a football pitch. So there'll still be a market for the sort of B4 zooms, which have a larger range, the possibility of 2 times extensions. Those big box lenses, which are used in sport now, they still need to be used. But for a host of other things, from small studio, macro close-up work, there's just
slow motion for sports, because this can do 4K 120.
That's true. That's true.
That's some pretty high quality.
To do that at the moment, you'd need not only with these 60K camera heads, but also you'd need an EVS system. We're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds, and this can do it. It really, I mustn't overuse the word remarkable, but it really is.
Absolutely. And I think there's a huge potential for this outside of the current PTZ market as well, because there are lots of multi-camera productions being shot on very large sensor, very high-end cameras. And now, particularly if you're already using Sony cameras, you get a PTZ for when a PTZ is useful, but without sacrificing image quality. So if you're shooting a huge gig, for example, and you've got 10 cameras around it that are operated cameras, zooming in and out and all the rest of it, great. But you could also have like 3 of these mounted on the stage underneath it, like you would with PTZs or something like that.
And they're not blocking
up in
the audience
rafters to shoot the audience or whatever. And it's the same quality.
It really is. It's not just the same quality. It's the same aesthetic as if we were using these large sensor Arris or Venice in this sort of production. And it is. All the PTZs I've had up to now have been based, even the top end ones like the UE150, nearly £10,000, and it's based on a camcorder that costs about £3,000, the optics and the sensor. We all know there's a reason why those camcorders are not used for really high-end cinema production. It's because that to get that flexibility, to get that zoom range and everything else, they're using smaller sensors, smaller glass, less sophisticated electronics because they're smaller. Brilliant for handheld, run and gun stuff. But when you've got a PTZ, it's sitting still. You don't necessarily need it to be so lightweight. And actually, it's night and day, the difference in quality between a $3,000 camcorder and a $6,000 plus a lens cinema camera. It's so obvious.
So we did a very quick little image quality test here this morning. We had them all here on the bar with this bookcase behind Kieran, and we did the same shot on all of them. And the image quality is different, so different. Everything's different. The color is different. The dynamic range is different. The bokeh is different. The feel of it is different. The sharpness is different. You can take literally any aspect of image quality, and it's not just an improvement. It's a mile leap.
Yes,
it really is.
And let's talk about low light. Most PTZs under $5,000 have got tiny little sensors, not even maybe a third of an inch or a half an inch at most. Then you've got the higher end PTZs which have a 1-inch sensor, which up until now we've called a huge 1-inch sensor in the PTZ, and they've been half decent in low light. You can get shots in natural light with those. Suddenly, for a jump from a 1-inch sensor to a full frame sensor, with the low light ability that gives, with the dynamic range increase that gives, it is remarkable.
Really is. I mean, I would put this, I think with this camera, Sony have almost created a whole new product category in the industry. Just like we've got camcorders and cinema cameras / large sensor cameras, you know, the difference between Sony's Z190 and their FX6, for example.
Yeah.
We now have that exact same situation in the PTZ market rather than in the handheld camera market.
Exactly. And just by putting a recorder in, they'd already made it different. But a recorder and a 1-inch sensor and the ins and outs this camera has, it means it can compete with the top-end PTZs as we see them at the moment. But we're talking about a price point which is only just above those 1-inch sensor PTZs, which have become a standard for high-end production.
Because it does cost more than a PTZ. I mean, there's no way around that. It costs more than a PTZ, but it's not 2 or 3 times more than a PTZ.
No.
It is that bit more than a PTZ. I mean, I guess the big question here is, do you think this is going to change the industry?
Yes. I think we must remember what it isn't. You know, we can't put a giant telephoto lenses on it. The motors won't be able to take the weight of that. So there are lots of situations where fixed lenses,
anything long range, no.
It's not going to really suit. And even if you use it in HD mode, you don't get the punch-in sufficient enough to give it that telephoto coverage. But what you do get, look at the size of it. When you compare that with a cameraman standing in front of an audience, we'll be able to place this in front of a stage.
You can place it in front of the audience. You can't place a camera operator in front of the audience.
Exactly. So you can put this closer to the action in places where you couldn't possibly put a guy carrying a camera.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an exciting camera.
It is. I can't wait to get our demo one.
Okay, thanks, Richard. So if you want any more information on the FR7, of course, just get in touch with the sales team here at Pro EV. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.